It's time!
Hey, Dave, listen up, please.
Sometimes a warrior just has to kind of lay down on the ground for a minute, just stay there for a second, and have a good bleed.
So what are you waiting for?
I don't know, something amazing.
Met for maybe the win. The follow is good. Arkansas in overtime. Beard, Gafford, buckle up.
And I just go out there and play the game. But, when people try to talk trash to me and tell me what I'm not and tell me that you're not this, and, it really just adds fire to my game. And that's when I really go out there and show, this is what I am and this is what I do.
Well, welcome into the Whole Hog Podcast. Seth Campbell, and I'm going to be joined alongside Scotty Bordelon. And listen, opposing teams are going to learn. Do not talk trash to Mason Jones, Scotty.
You're going to learn today.
You going to learn, and you're going to learn that you should stay away from that because Mason is a talented enough player as is. You shouldn't motivate him. Arkansas played probably one of their best halves in the first half against Tennessee. Would you agree with that, Scotty?
For sure. I think anytime you put up 40 points and Mason Jones gets cooking early, that's normally a pretty good recipe for a good half. For the entire game, according to KenPom, Arkansas posted its second best offensive efficiency number of the season at 127.9. The only one that was better was when Mason went for 41 against Tulsa, and it was dang close. It was neck and neck. It was pushing the best offensive performance Arkansas's had this year. Obviously, Mason was kind of the story of the game. He goes for 37 again, and I think I looked at you. Maybe it was about 6 minutes into the game, and Mason had already had 11 or 12 points.
Yeah, he was already in double digits.
Yeah, I was like, this dude is about to just go berserk the rest of the way, and he did, and he abused Tennessee at all three levels. I did the shot charts this morning. Had a 7 a.m. wake up call after getting to bed about 2:30.
He's a dedicated journalist.
He scored in the lane 4 times. He hit 4 mid-range jumpers on 6 attempts, and then he buried 3 threes. 2 of those threes came in a 30-second span. And right after he hit that second 3 in that quick little burst, I mean, you could see smoke coming off of his hands. Dude was like Rick Barnes said, he was obviously into it. I'm like, yes, he was. That's pretty good analysis. He had it all going.
Yeah, no joke. He was feeling it when you've got Mason Jones at the top of the key, and I think this almost goes for any player, but when you have that guy that is at the top of the key and dribbles and gets into his step back shot from the 3-point line and is able to drill that, I mean, that's just a confidence boost all the way around. And then to see him do it the next time down the court, like you said, a 30-second span where Mason hits 2 back-to-back threes. Those were contested, especially the second one. There was a hand in his face.
A long hand, too. I think it was Yves Pons.
Yeah, and he dropped it.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, boy.
Yeah, it was crazy. One of the things that I really like about Mason, and we could talk forever about everything he's got in his bag, but that step-back jumper, step back 3 moving to his left is one of the deadliest shots that he's got, and that's what he hit Tennessee with on that second 3. That just kind of, it more or less put the game away right there. I think it was just a little bit past the midway point in the second half. The first that second 3, you could tell he kind of got ISO'd on the right wing, and he kind of sizes up his matchup, and then he just 3 or 4 dribbles to just work himself to get that ball into his left hand, and then steps back. That was tough. And the first one was probably deeper, but I mean, neither one of those shots drew any rim. I mean, it was all net.
It was pretty, is what it was. And all right, we're gonna move forward, and we'll give you a taste of what we're going to look forward into this podcast. We got Jimmy Witt and his fantastic guarding ability to shut down the Vescovi of Tennessee. We also have Ethan Henderson getting his second start, first one at home. He came up with some big minutes. Arkansas tried to give it away, Scotty, but they rallied. And Musselman said this basketball is a game of 3 or 4 runs, and we'll get into that as well. And then, we'll talk about this team as a whole moving forward with Isaiah Joe, how their tournament chances are looking right now. But first, let's go back to the point about Arkansas almost pulled an Arkansas, as some Arkansas fans would say, of coming out with probably one of their best first halves they've played all season long. The best if from what we said earlier in the podcast. And then all of a sudden you look up and Tennessee's within 2.
Yeah.
And Arkansas fans are going, oh gosh, not again.
You know the crazy thing? 1 year ago to the day, Arkansas blew a 16-point lead at Kentucky.
Ooh.
Last year. And that's kind of in the back of my mind when Jordan Bowden hits a pull-up jumper from the free throw line and cut it to 2. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why can this team not put a team away? And Jordan Bowden kept Tennessee in it because, like you said, Santiago Vescovi was a complete non-factor in the game. But Arkansas, right after Bowden hit that jumper, went on a 9-0 run and got up by 11. I don't think Tennessee ever got within 9 again.
Yeah, Bowden's stat line, he was 7 of 16 from the field goal. It's big as he hit 4 3-pointers, 19 points.
Yeah, the dude was shooting 19% from 3 in conference before last night. I think he hit 15 threes in like the first 14 conference games, and then he hits how many?
4.
4 last night. Sounds about right.
Yeah,
but he was the only guy for Tennessee that hit a 3. That was huge. I think they finished 4 of 17 from deep. Still defending the 3-point line exceptionally well.
That is something that you don't normally see. If a guy that's shooting 17% comes in and knocks down 4 3-pointers from Arkansas, which is a team that guards the 3-point line. Musselman has mentioned it the past 2 press conferences, post-game press conferences, is we guard the 3-point line the best in the country. And they do. So that was kind of unique to see Bowden hit 4 3-pointers on them. But like you said, he was the only guy to hit 4 3-pointers against them. And I think that makes a difference. Definitely. Okay, but when Arkansas calls timeout, Musselman is getting onto them in the huddle. He says in the postgame something that I think really stands out here, Scotty. And they're coming off the floor, and Mason, I think, said that Isaiah Joe was talking about, hey, this is a game of runs. They had their run. Now it's our time. And Musselman was really impressed with the mature approach from his guys.
For sure. I mean, and at that point, I think the question was asked to Muss after the game. He was like, do you think, because Isaiah went for 20-plus for the second straight game since his return, the question was asked, is Isaiah, even post-surgery, or his legs, maybe even more fresh than they were pre-surgery? And he didn't really answer the question directly, but what he did note was that at about that time when Tennessee, started to get back into the game, what they wanted was Isaiah and Mason in pick and rolls. One of them, top of the key, middle pick and roll, ball screens, and Tennessee didn't really have an answer for it. And they just a lot of obviously those runs are about making shots and getting stops, but those shots that Arkansas got to fall were huge, and the 3 that Isaiah hit, he just kind of snapped a crossover back, I think, deep left wing, and buried it. And I think at that point the game was over. Just I think that was such a crushing blow to Tennessee, because you're right there, and then in a matter of like a couple of minutes you're back down double figures. And I think that little run right there, that 9-0 run, kind of showed some growth, because Arkansas at that point, after Bowden hits that pull-up, they're kind of on their heels a little bit, because they had led by as many as, 15, 16 points?
Yes.
And then Tennessee obviously gets back into it, but they finally put their foot on a team's throat and like I said earlier, didn't let them get back within 9 at that point. And defensively, they had their lapses at times, maybe on the interior, and maybe lost Jordan Bowden a couple too many times, but other than that, solid defensive effort all around.
Yeah, it was a solid defensive effort. And before we move on to the defensive effort, and especially the defensive effort by Jimmy Whitt, let's talk about Isaiah Joe for a second. And you talked about his ability to snap that ball back. You brought this to my attention, and I think it's very true, Scotty, of his handles and his ability to kind of create off of the bounce. For whatever reason, they look better post-surgery than pre-surgery.
It's crazy. Like, we've seen it. We saw it on Saturday, too. I think Isaiah, late in the game, got matched up on the right wing with Mitchell Smith of Missouri. And Isaiah just kind of sized him up, kind of like Mason did with Yves Pons. And Isaiah, kind of dribbled, kind of faked like he was going right, snapped that crossover back to the left hand, and then just splashed a three. And I thought Isaiah was, especially against Tennessee, I thought he was decisive with the ball in his hands. Bob leaned over to me at one point in the game and said, "I've never seen Isaiah, drive the ball as much." And, he's probably right. I didn't track the off the bounce shooting numbers last night, which I probably should have. But Isaiah had pretty good success getting in the lane. I know one time he pulled up for a jumper just inside the free throw line and probably got it partially tipped. Officials, just, I guess, assumed that he airballed. But aside from that, I think he was 2 of 4 inside the arc. And he got to the line, how many times?
Isaiah got to the line 12 times.
Yeah, got to the line 12 times.
And made every single one of them.
I mean, that's telling you that he's doing a pretty good job of, getting to his spots, getting to his spots around the rim off the bounce, which is really good to see. I mean, because he's not just standing around the perimeter or, just trying to gun shots beyond the arc. I mean, he's making whoever's guarding him really work.
Yeah, he definitely is. And I'm going to say this, Scotty, and you can definitely disagree. Mason Jones is the most outstanding player on this team, for sure. Isaiah Joe might be the most valuable player on this team because of when he comes into the game, he spaces everything out, and he allows Mason Jones to be outstanding. And Mason Jones is outstanding without Isaiah Joe. Let's not forget that. But there's pressure taken off of him, and there's more lanes to drive with Isaiah Joe, and that's the value that he adds in addition to his three-point shooting.
Yeah, that's exactly what Rick Barnes said last night. With Isaiah back, it provides another gap you have to defend when you're playing defense against Arkansas, because you can't play the gap as much as you want to, because you have to continually pay attention to Isaiah Joe, because if you give him just a sliver too much space, I mean, he's gonna bury you. And then he starts, he hits one, he just as easily rip off 2 or 3 more in a row. So I definitely get where you're coming from.
Yeah, and I remember there was one specific time that stuck out in this last game. Isaiah got the ball wide open on the three-point line first half, and everybody in the stands stood up with a three. He ended up missing it, but once he sees that first one to fall, then he starts to get rolling, and you just can't leave him open from three, because he will knock him down. Another instance that sticks out in my mind, Jalen Harris driving into the lane and dishes it back outside to Isaiah Joe, who was left open again. This time somebody comes out late to put a hand in his face, but then he drills that one. You're not going to get lucky every single time when Isaiah Joe is out there. If you're the defense and he's shooting an open three, that's not the shot that you want Arkansas taking for sure.
And through 2 games, post-surgery, Isaiah's, I think, shooting 39% from three. I think that's a pretty good mark after 2.5 weeks off.
Yeah, that ain't bad. All right, 3 games left in the year, and a guy that has been clutch for Arkansas all throughout the year and was clutch again yesterday, although it's not going to show up in the stat book necessarily, is Jimmy Whitt. And here's what Eric Musselman had to say about Whitt and his ability to shut down Vescovi of Tennessee.
We have not guarded a player like that at the collegiate level. We didn't do it at Nevada. Not going to go into a lot of detail because we could play him again. Overly proud that Jimmy was able to guard him and shade him the way that we wanted to, because it's not an easy thing to do for 40 minutes, and it was a calculated gamble, but we couldn't have guarded him any worse.
Scotty, Witt did a fantastic job on Vescovi, because that's who we were hearing about, was their main player all week leading up to this. And his final stats, 3 of 8 from the field. He ended with just 6 points, didn't make a three-pointer. He did a really good job shutting down Vescovi.
Vescovi is the head of the snake for Tennessee. I mean, it's obvious. He's incredibly crafty, and going into Wednesday's game, according to Ken Palm, Vescovi had the SEC's top assist rate. It was like he was assisting on almost 33% of the Vols' buckets when he's been on the floor since he joined the team, or at least in SEC play. And he didn't have a single assist against Arkansas. First time, he's only played, I think Wednesday was his 15th game since joining the team, but first game without an assist, first game without a made three. And you have to give Jimmy Witt a lot of credit. Jalen Harris and Mason Jones also kind of took a few possessions to defend Vescovi, but Jimmy did a great job of shading Vescovi to his right, because obviously he's crafty left-handed guy. Going into Arkansas's game at Tennessee, both Eric Musselman and assistant coach Clay Moser, both guys who have previous NBA experience, both compared his craftiness to Manu Ginobili, who's another international superstar. Like, he was phenomenal. Obviously one of the craftiest dudes to ever play in the league. Kind of brought the Euro step to America. Really changed a lot of things with that, especially transition game. But Vescovi was just a complete non-factor. I think by the first media timeout, he had a couple of turnovers. He airballed a floater in the lane, he airballed another 3, and you mentioned he was 3 of 8 from the floor, but one of his buckets was off an Arkansas turnover when Tennessee was applying pressure in the backcourt. So you take that bucket away, he's made 2 shots in 37 minutes. That's pretty good. And his first bucket didn't come until more than 17 minutes into the game. That's cutting the head of the snake off right there. That's how you play one of your better halves of the season. Yeah,
no joke. And Jimmy Witt, before the game, Scotty and I were looking at him, and to say that he was 100% before the game, I think would have been a lie. He was moving around, and he wasn't moving very quick. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I do the live updates. I get that stuff, all that stuff set up, probably 30 to 45 minutes before the game starts, and I kind of try to predict who I think is going to be in the starting lineup. I had Jimmy in there until I saw him in pregame, and then I took his name out because he was getting some special attention, stretching out that back. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was working with strength coach Dave Richardson, and he wasn't going through layup lines initially when we first got to our seats. And so I'm wondering, what his status is, because if Arkansas doesn't have him, then you're kind of wondering who's going to guard Vescovi. I mean, I think would have been Isaiah Joe, but then you got to figure out who's going to cover Jordan Bowden. And so having Jimmy there, and gosh, the dude he was great. I think he played how many minutes did Jimmy play? I mean, it was high 30s.
I have it right here. Jimmy Witt, minutes played. Well, I can't find it now. 35.
Played 35 minutes.
Almost 36.
Yeah, that's beyond what I thought he was probably going to be able to give Arkansas. Just watching him in pregame, he didn't really look like anything was bothering him. He didn't have the greatest night offensively, but he scored 6 points, 6 rebounds. 6 points and 6 rebounds. Four assists too.
That's what he's there for.
His 4 assists are his most in an SEC game, and that was the most he's had in a game since Valpo in late December. And so Jimmy had an all-around really, really good game. Had 2 steals too, and he just kind of pestered Vescovi all night long. I think there were 2 or 3 times that Vescovi was either trying to make a pass or Tennessee was trying to get the ball to Vescovi to initiate their offense, and Jimmy knocked the basketball out of bounds, and just he was an irritant all night.
That's what I noticed when Jimmy was guarding Vescovi is there looked like a few times he was just in the passing lane.
Yeah.
Almost like Jimmy was quicker, and I don't know that if Jimmy is quicker than Vescovi or not, but whether that's the scouting report or whether that's just Jimmy trying harder on defense, or if that is natural ability and Jimmy is quicker than Vescovi.
He's got to give Jimmy some credit for how crafty he is too, on the defensive end.
But to get his hand in the passing lane, I think it happened. I wrote down at least 3 different times that Jimmy knocked a ball away while Tennessee's getting into the offense. And yeah, the ball stays with Tennessee, but that's a few seconds that come off the shot clock, and Tennessee has to reset their entire offense again and go through it. And it just shows the effort that Jimmy was playing with. He played the second most minutes out of anybody. Jimmy had 35-44 and Mason had 36-46. He's the second most guy, and coming into the game, he was getting special attention on his back. He's a key to this team, can shut down the best defender, and I kind of noticed that they left him at the point guard maybe just a little bit longer than they had in the past. A lot of the times he'll start at point, and by halfway through the first half, you'll see Mason Jones come out and take it, or Jalen Harris will come into the game and take it. But it really looked like they stuck with Jimmy for a lot of it, and then they went to Mason at point in the second half, and then towards the end of the second half, when Isaiah started heating up and Mason was getting hot, then they just run that pick and roll with either Isaiah or Mason, and it can be either one handling the ball. Isaiah brought the ball up a few times, and that's just a deadly combination right there.
It's nice options to have, I'd say, those 3 guys handling the ball.
Yeah.
And I'd also, going back to Jimmy's defense, just not even, Jimmy did come away with a couple steals, but those deflections, knocking the ball away, that just kind of, like if Vescovi ever did get into a rhythm, which I don't think he did, it just kind of, just like the brief pauses in action, like you're expecting to catch a pass and initiate offense, the ball gets knocked out of bounds. It just kind of throws you out of sync a little bit. And, Arkansas too, I asked Muss in that soundbite we heard earlier, just what specifically Arkansas did to just kind of limit Vescovi, because they didn't, like I said, didn't hit a 3, didn't have an assist for the first time in his brief college career. They also changed up their pick and roll defense, I think ahead of the Missouri game. And I got a text from Jimmy Carter, whose basketball analysis when he was here was unmatched. He texted me after the game, was talking about Arkansas's pick and roll coverage. They dropped Ethan Henderson, prevented free paths to the rim. And, if the ball did get to the rim, there was probably a pretty good chance Ethan was going to swat it away.
Yeah, no joking. That's who we got to talk about next, is the man that got his first start in Fayetteville, his second start of the season, and from Little Rock gets an opportunity and really made the most of it. There's some things that you can improve on, but there's some things that everybody can improve on when they go into the game. He missed an open layup, but he was able to put in another layup that he got off offensive rebound that kind of seemed to be his kryptonite in his last start. He didn't get into foul trouble and was able to stay on the floor.
I don't know how he did that, but bravo.
Right? For a guy that was coming into the game, when we were doing the last basketball podcast in Mid-America, Scotty astutely pointed out that Ethan was averaging per 40 minutes, wasn't it? Close to 11 fouls?
I think it was about 9.
Okay.
He's got it down. He's under 8 now.
He's under 8 now. That's progress to me, and he's a good rim protector. He's able to swat a few balls away. Bravo to Ethan Henderson and his performance of this week against Tennessee.
We mentioned that Mason just kind of got a little bit loose before the first media stoppage of the game. Ethan was an animal in his own rights. He had, I think, 4 rebounds, 3 offensive, had the putback, and blocked 2 shots in the first 4 minutes. That's bringing energy. Like Eric Musselman talked on Monday about, feeling pretty comfortable and pretty confident in who 4 of his 5 starters are, but that 5th starter was still up in the air. What Ethan Henderson did against Tennessee is how you stay in the starting lineup. And I know Muss he's gonna look at every game in terms of matchups, but if Ethan can bring that kind of energy and use his length to his advantage, he got credited, I think, with 3 blocks. I think he could have been credited with 4 after rewatching the game. And he came into the post game press conference for the first time in his career, I think.
Yes.
And he was like, "Where are my 2 steals at? Where are my 2 steals at?" He didn't get credit for them, but he definitely had 2. And so I don't know where those two turnovers for Tennessee got lost in space, but Ethan was everywhere. That was terrific. That's the growth that you want to see from a guy like Ethan. And according to Muss, they've seen a lot of growth from him in practice. He's evolved, developed a little bit, and Muss said he's picking up the terminology and he's really talkative in practice, and that lets the coaching staff know that he's on the same page and he's kind of locked into what they're doing defensively.
Yeah, Muss said at the post-game presser that when a guy is going through practice and he's not vocal, as a coach, you wonder how much he is understanding. And that can be some people's personality, is that they aren't vocal, but they are understanding. But a coach doesn't know how much you know unless you communicate how much you know.
Exactly.
And he said in the past 2 weeks, Ethan has done a much better job of communicating on the practice court that lets the coaches know and have faith in Ethan that when he goes out there in a game, he actually knows what's going on. And like you said, he's been able to pick up the terminology a lot better here recently. And this is something, just an observation. Musselman hasn't said this. Musselman has said that he doesn't necessarily think that Arkansas needs to play a lot of players. He said earlier in the season that he was able to play NBA players in NBA games with like 8 people that he would come off of the bench with. And he's like, and we played 82 games a season. We're only playing 30 something in college basketball and before the postseason stuff. So I really believe that he can get through with 7. He said that earlier. Now I think he's kind of seeing, Scotty, that he can get by with 7, and especially if the next guy off the bench doesn't bring you anything. But if Ethan starts coming around, I could see Ethan getting a little more playing time and just spreading out the rest through everybody else, so that this team just doesn't look dog tired after 2 games in 2 weeks. Or
Yeah.
2 games in a week, sorry.
Right. And I think Arkansas kind of showed against Tennessee that you can win a game playing 7 guys. And, Reggie Chaney played just 8 minutes, and Gene Silla, I think, got in
39 seconds.
Yeah, Gene recorded a trillion last night with 1 minute and no other stats. But it's just kind of game by game. It's all about matchups, and Muss will be the first to tell you that just because a guy played well in the last game doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to play a lot or play well in the next one. I mean, it's very game by game, but I really like what Ethan Henderson provided. That putback that he got off one of his offensive rebounds, I thought that was really big, because the guy is quick off his feet, and he's got fairly quick hands, I think, in terms of defensive rebounding. I think he finished with 4 offensive rebounds, which was huge, and then 5 defensive rebounds. That was obviously the most on the team. That's what Muss wants from his frontline guys. You can offensive rebound. That's terrific, because obviously getting second chance points and extra possessions is always big. And anytime you get an offensive rebound from a frontline guy, the defense is collapsed, because they're obviously trying to rebound too. And the best time, almost about the best time that you can shoot a 3 is off an offensive rebound. So that's huge that Ethan was as active on the offensive glass as he was. But what's going to keep a guy on the floor is being a rim protector, blocking 3 shots or 4 shots, playing pretty good post defense, knocking a couple balls away, coming up with 2 steals, and defensive rebounding. I mean, that's the thing. You got to get boards from your big guys.
Yeah, you definitely do. And if you just look at the minutes, how they were spread out, Ethan, with a career game, playing almost 30 minutes, 29 minutes, 53 seconds. But you look at it and you say, all right, well, the matchup next week against Georgia, or this weekend against Georgia, it may not favor Ethan. I haven't looked into it, so I don't know necessarily. But maybe it favors Chaney. Maybe it favors Bailey. Either way, you were able to get quality minutes out of Henderson in a matchup that favored him, to where Bailey's coming into the Georgia game only having played 11 minutes and 56 seconds in the last game. You got Chaney that's coming in, only played 8 minutes and 29 seconds. And that might be what Chaney plays for the here on now. But also, you have other guys that are guards. Jalen Harris only logged 10 minutes, 13 seconds. If somebody gets in foul trouble against Georgia, if somebody's just not having a good game. Desi has had fantastic numbers, which I want to get to right after this. Desi has had fantastic numbers coming off of the bench, but say he doesn't perform well. You have Jalen that can come off the bench now against Georgia, and he's shooting and he's fresh because he didn't play a lot. And I just think it gives Arkansas options. If you have the options and the players are giving you something off the bench, then I believe Musselman will utilize them.
Definitely. And I don't know that it's fair to say that, you're going to have probably, anytime you go on the road, you're probably going to have everybody pitch in some way. Georgia is clearly a better team at home than they are on the road. And Anthony Edwards, who I think is, Isaac Okoro at Auburn's probably got a pretty good shot. I think it's those two guys kind of battling out for, freshman of the year in the league. But Anthony Edwards is going to be a handful, and they're probably going to they might throw, multiple bodies at him. And at some point, a guy like Gene Tausila, whether you want him guarding Anthony Edwards or not, he might get a couple of possessions to defend him. And Jimmy Witt, if I had to guess, would probably be the matchup because he tends to guard the opposing team's best player. But you're going to have all hands on deck because, Georgia's by no means a great team, but they can be dangerous.
Yeah, that's a good point, Scotty. And like I said, I want to get back to Desi Sills coming off of the bench. He's come off the bench the past 2 games, and he has been electric off the bench. Musselman has said he's playing 30-plus minutes off the bench, and any guy that's playing in 30-plus minutes will be happy whether or not he's coming off the bench or not. But when his stats off the bench are what really stand out.
It's crazy. He's averaging a little bit over 14 points a game in the 4 games that he's come off the bench this year. I think it was TCU, which I think he was 3 of 3 from deep in that game. I don't think he hit a 3 against South Carolina, but I think he finished with like 6 or 8 points. And then against Missouri and Tennessee, he has been just absolutely phenomenal the last couple of games. And he's starting to shoot the 3 really well again, almost just like he did about this point last season, where he was locked in as anybody from beyond the arc, and that left side of the floor beyond the arc is looking pretty good for him. He averaged, I think he went for 17 against Missouri, and, I want to go back to that game for a minute because he knocked down 4 threes, which I think tied a career high for him in a single game, and then he was 2 of 2 inside the arc, or in the lane too, and his final bucket of the game, he went left and kind of met 6'7" Kobe Brown in the middle of the lane. And I guess Desi may have gotten a knee into Brown's hip because he just kind of crumbled to the ground. But Desi tossed a floater in, ran back down the other way, and kind of had his hand about a foot above the ground telling Kobe Brown he was too little. That right there, I wrote on Saturday, that's kind of a snapshot of the confidence that Desi's playing with. And then against Tennessee, he was lights out again. Finished with 4 rebounds on top of 14 points, hit 3 more threes. He's 7 of 11 from 3 since last weekend. And in the 4 games that he's come off the bench this year, he's 4 of 6 in the left corner. Desi is about the only guy on this team to this point who's like a real threat from the left corner, or from either corner, really.
Just crazy.
And he's 4 of 6 from the left wing. So, it's hard to argue with 8 out of 12 on the left side of the floor in the 4 games that he's come off the bench. And another thing that I really like in those 4 games, he's 8 out of 10 in the lane. And so he's hitting the outside shot when teams, jump out at him to try to, if there's a poor closeout, Desi's going to make you pay. And he has in the 4 games that he hasn't started, playing just really terrific, efficient basketball. So Desi's back in his groove, and I kind of joked with somebody last night. I said if Desi comes in, you should ask him how it feels to know that he's never going to start again.
No joke, but the way that he's come off the bench so efficient, that I don't think he is going to ever start again. But must as I said, made a good point that, hey, if you're playing 30-plus minutes a game, I don't really think
Still
it matters.
playing starters minutes, yeah.
I don't think it matters.
Not starting allows Desi to kind of get a feel for the flow of the game, and once Desi comes in, he's flipped the switch like in those 4 games. When Desi is going, he is my favorite player to watch. Yeah. Because he turns in, he goes from a 6'1", 185-pound guard into like a 6'8", 220-pound monster. I mean, that's it. And his 3-point stroke, he's finding it, and he's becoming one of the toughest guys on the roster to guard.
Shout out to Pinto on Twitter, so I'm gonna steal this from him. So I didn't come up with this, but he's tougher than a well-done steak at Western Sizzling.
True.
When he gets going.
Yep. No question.
All right, Scotty, let's wrap this up with what everybody wants to know in Razorback Nation. This team is completely different with Isaiah Joe. No question about it. 2 things I have for you. We'll start first here. Does the committee look at this team differently in that 5-game stretch where they had those 5 losses because Isaiah Joe wasn't on the team?
They're obviously going to look at what Arkansas was when they didn't have him, because you can't just ignore those games. You know what I mean? And I don't think Arkansas wants the committee to completely ignore it either, because you beat TCU, who at the time was a pretty solid team. I think they've kind of hit the skids lately, but really only one game that you weren't in. And even without Isaiah Joe, this team was, they were so frustrating to watch, but they were fun to watch too, at times. And, that stretch allowed other guys like Adriel Bailey to kind of, increase his role and see his production grow. And they're obviously going to look at those 6 games without Isaiah, but, you got guys like John Rothstein now tweeting morning after Arkansas wins a game that, Arkansas is 17-5 with Isaiah. They're a pretty legit team with 2 of the more explosive offensive guards in the league. And then you got a third hand in Desi Sills, and then, Jimmy Witt can get going. And Adriel Bailey's been playing some of the best ball of his Arkansas career too. So this is it's a really intriguing team. It's all going to take care of itself though. And this weekend's game at Georgia it's their biggest game of the year. Every game from here on out is going to be your biggest game of the year, but showing that you can go on the road and win games that you're supposed to win, that's vitally important. And then obviously you want to continue to build momentum going into obviously Saturday's game against Georgia is huge, but your biggest opponent the rest of the way in the regular season, like your opportunity for your biggest win, is LSU. I know LSU's been kind of sliding of late, but that LSU team's a top 25 caliber team, and that's the game on your schedule that you can make a little noise if you win that one. So
I agree. All right, moving through, let's do this. We're going to run through some scenarios, and then you're going to tell me, in order for Arkansas to make the tournament, what they need to do in the SEC tournament. Okay, so I'm going to tell you the scenarios for the end of the regular season. You're going to tell me what Arkansas needs to do in the SEC tournament in order to make the NCAA tournament, okay? Let's start with an obvious one. Arkansas at Georgia, LSU at home, at Texas A&M. They go 0-3. What's their job in the SEC tournament?
You got to win it.
That's pretty obvious. Flip it around. Arkansas 3-0 in the next 3 games. What do you need to do in the SEC tournament?
I think if you win 2, you feel really, really confident, because 2 of Arkansas's last 3 games in the regular season are on the road. So if you go and win 2 more games on the road, that would put Arkansas at 5 or 6 true road wins. this season. I mean, Georgia and Texas A&M are not great teams by any means, but we just saw Kentucky go into Texas A&M and kind of struggle. Reed Arenas can be a tough place to play.
And it has been for Arkansas.
For a number of reasons, for sure. But I think if Arkansas goes 3-0, obviously I think they win one in the SEC tournament. I think you're feeling pretty good. I think you go 2-1 down the stretch, which I think is likely. I think you win 2 in the SEC tournament. I think you're feeling pretty good.
And then,
but you got to also have some of those other teams on the bubble, like Mississippi State, South Carolina. Might even throw Alabama in there. Tennessee's kind of in the mix, maybe not so much anymore. But you got to have some of those other bubble teams kind of fade too.
And I think this is a key part of this as we're moving forward. Let's go with Arkansas finishes 1-2. Their job in the SEC tournament is to
make a deep run.
Okay. And they may not have to win it all, but they might have to go all the way to the championship game. I agree with that. All right. Now there's 2 different scenarios I want to go with Arkansas finishing in this 2-1 scenario. Arkansas finishes 2-1 with 1 road win over either one of those teams and a victory against LSU at home. How does that span out for them in the SEC tournament?
So you said win split on the road and win
split on the road, beat LSU at home.
I think you'd feel. I mean, obviously, I think you'd feel better winning 2 in the tournament, and with Isaiah Joe back, like I kind of expect Arkansas to go 2-1 down the stretch, but I could very easily see them go 3-0, and if they did that, notch 2 more road wins, that'd obviously be enormous. This team is just so different with Isaiah. They're back to full strength now. They're back to full strength, and like I said earlier, 17-5 with him, and playing with a ton of confidence. And just Isaiah's presence brings so much confidence, I think, to everybody else that's on the floor with him. So I don't think 3-0, going 3-0 down the stretch is impossible. I think 2-1 is probably most likely. But if you do go 2-1 down the stretch, I think you win 1 in the conference tournament, you're feeling all right. You win 2, I think you're feeling good. Feeling good.
All right. Would you rather, let's wrap it up with this question here, Scotty. Arkansas finishes 2-1 to end the conference. Would you rather those 2 victories be the 2 road games or a road game and a victory against LSU?
Oh, that's a good question. I think obviously you want to beat LSU. And according to KenPom, like Georgia's KenPom ranking is 97 and Texas A&M's is 140. So it's like you really don't want to lose to a team that's ranked plus 100 plus, in KenPom rankings, and obviously another team that's bordering on the 100 line. But I think Arkansas definitely they got to take care of home floor, man. Like, you've missed some big opportunities to knock some teams off and get some wins under your belt at home with like Auburn and Mississippi State and Kentucky, all games that you've been in. You got to protect home floor, win the games that you're supposed to. And I think, gosh, I don't know which of the 2 road games that you'd rather win, but I think closing the regular season by beating Texas A&M, that, like I said earlier, that can be a tough place to play, like no matter who you are, evidenced by Kentucky the other day. I think closing the regular season strong would be big.
All right, that's good stuff there, Scotty. Thanks for joining us once again. Your analysis is always welcome here on the Basketball Podcast of Mid-America. As I said, that is Scotty Bordelon. You can read his analysis and his breakdown of the current games that are going on. And hey, there are still 3 more games left, and possibly there's definitely the SEC tournament, and there's just more than likely going to be a postseason tournament in the works for the Arkansas Razorbacks as well. Whether or not it's the NCAA tournament remains to be seen, but you can follow Scotty and his analysis on wholehogsports.com, so make sure to get over there, read all of his fantastic articles. You can also follow him. It's a good Twitter follow at NWA Scotty. I'm Seth Campbell, host of the Basketball Podcast in Mid-America, saying thank you for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at SethCampbell5, and you can follow Whole Hog Sports on Twitter for all of your latest Razorback basketball and sports needs, Razorback sports needs, at Whole Hog Sports. Well, as I said, for Scotty Bordelon, I am Seth Campbell, signing off for now. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week.